Hey everybody, thanks for coming. Wow, those of you way in the back, no, I'm just kidding. This is a good group, so thanks for being here. My name is John Cook, and I'm on staff here at the chapel, as are the rest of the gentlemen up on the stage here. I'm going to just give you a brief background on who I am, and then I'm going to introduce each one of these guys. But just wanted to say my background is I started as a volunteer here when I was real young, and became a part-time employee, and then from there have gone on to be on staff here full-time. I was the media director here for, I can't actually remember, but 8-ish years, somewhere in that range, and recently transitioned to a role that kind of blends together the music and the media team. My background is video production, those kind of things, so I'm technically inclined, but certainly nowhere near the engineering mindset of the gentleman to my left, and certainly nowhere near as creative and right-brained as the gentleman to my right. So I am the therapist in this session. We thought about bringing couches out to sit on each side, but they didn't want to lay down. They thought they'd fall asleep, so we decided to keep that. To my far right is Jeremiah Halstead. He is a guitar player and also is on staff and helps to coordinate volunteers in the music world and is our, I call him King of Planning Center. He's in charge of all those things, so he's very good at that, as well as building playback elements and all the things that help to make our Sunday morning services sound awesome. Benji Cowart needs no introduction. You know who he is, but he's an awesome dude government spy, who writes lots of great music as a cover for those things. And to my left, these two guys I've served with for forever. We, again, grew up together. Kyle Kinda is the technical director here at the chapel, and he is mainly an audio guy, but also very much an engineer and thinks very logically, so it'll be an interesting discussion today. Chris Kish is also audio-driven mostly, and also thinks to some degree engineering. I will say this is kind of cool. In the last year or two, I've corrupted both of them into the world of video. Chris now edits our television show, which he was really excited about. And Kyle has been working on some video upgrades now that he's in charge of video systems. So in both areas, I have corrupted both of them when they both used to call me the Vidiot. So it's very, very good for that. So real quick, let me get just a feel for the room. How many of you guys in here are in the music ministry side of church service or whatever? Okay. And how many of you are more technically inclined or tech people? And how many wear more than one hat? How many do both? All right. Two hands, I see it. How many of you are volunteer, full-time volunteer? And of those of you who are volunteers, how many of you lead a team of volunteers? Okay, cool. How many of you are on paid staff at a church? Cool, wow, split like evenly. Interesting. Cool. All right, cool. Well, let me just talk about, before we dive into some of the specifics and get into what I hope will be an opportunity for us to examine this paradigm between what I would say, engineer-type mindsets and creative-type mindsets, which is really more the issue than it is function of musician or technical person. I just want to kind of just identify the fact that there are going to be natural differences, right? Differences in concerns, right? Musicians are up on stage. They have a different position within the service. And tech people are very behind the scenes. So what they're concerned about throughout the course of a Sunday environment is different just by the nature of the role. Differences in personality makeup, for sure, right? Those who are more technically inclined are absolutely more logical. So if you can't convince me that it makes sense, it's wrong. There's a very black and white mindset to it. Creative people are much more gray in some of those areas and willing to say, more like a rainbow. We won't go far with that. Also just a difference in what drives the passion, right? I'm not going to ever convince Benji to be passionate about the cool new soundboard that Kyle's passionate about. It's just not going to happen. Now, if we can agree that there's some benefit to those things, sure. But in terms of what gets you jazzed up in the morning, there's just different passions, right? So before we walk down this road, we got to know there's just natural differences. There's natural inclinations to kind of understand. And I think once we understand those things, we're not going to try and force each other into a situation where we're saying, you need to be like me. And a lot of people, I think a lot of the issues that we deal with in this music versus tech paradigm we find ourselves in is having to do with the fact that people are willing or not willing to say, hey, you're different, and that's okay. We can work together because we have a common goal, a common vision going forward. So All right, so I just want to talk about what I'll say are a few dangerous mindsets. So just to kind of have you understand how this class is going to go, I'm going to let each one of these guys talk a little bit about what they think after I kind of outline some things. And then when we're all done, make some notes. We have a mic down here at the front. We'd love to hear your questions because we'd love to just talk through specifically some things that we don't land on. You know, we sat and talked a little bit about what can we chat about regarding the tension that exists. But, you know, we're one case. There's hundreds more cases, and maybe we can help to shed some light for you guys. I will say also, you know, I think we do have a pretty healthy relationship, which has grown over the years based on some pretty hard work, honestly, that had to go into developing some relationships. Back a bunch of years ago, there was just extreme tension and constant fighting and constant, you know, clashing of the minds, so to speak. So hopefully in this we can share some of the things we've learned and hopefully help to grow in the process. So a couple dangerous mindsets. Number one, I'm more important than you. And this can exist on both sides of the aisle, so to speak. You know, from the musician standpoint, I've seen, you know, that hey, I'm on stage, so I get to dictate. You need to make me look good. I'm the one who's going to be the front guy. I'm the one everyone's looking at. Looks like an idiot when the monitors aren't working or whatever. So you got to fix this for me. I'm more important than you, so just do it. You know, maybe the music guy outranks the tech guy on the staff team, or maybe the music guy is the staff member and the tech guy is the volunteer. You know, that tension can exist because of that. And maybe the tech guy thinks, hey, you know what? You have no idea what you're talking about. You are wrong. I'm more knowledgeable, and so therefore I've sacrificed more time. I got here before you. I'm way more important than you. So I think that's one mindset that we definitely have come across and had to work through. So guys, you want to chime in and say anything related to that mindset or paradigm?
Yeah, I think just a very brief, it's really interesting. We have an unusual setup. I actually, I've been here for close to 7 years now. And I came as an outsider where a lot of these guys grew up in the church and grew up as volunteers. And so a lot of other settings I'd been to, the music ministry told the tech guys what to do. They were under the same ministry. Here at our church, they are two separate ministries as their peer ministries. And now some of that's recently changed, but when I first came, so it was very interesting for me as a worship leader to undo the mindset of I really want to play the heart of this card is I'm more important than you. But the way that I spiritualize it is, oh, this is the worship. So you can put all the spiritual brands on it you want to, but the bottom line is so when you want your way, basically, well, I want this, and everybody around you tech-wise is saying that's not for the greater good. So it's almost like, and I get there's a balance there. We've all got to look at the big picture and figure out, okay, we want to make sure the tail doesn't wag the dog, and I get that. But you also, that ego can really come into play of just getting your way with your tech staff and saying, well, no, I just want this. And so even with Kyle, I mean, probably more than anybody, if there's, and I wouldn't even call it conflict, although I will say if you're going to have a healthy relationship, there better be some conflict. So in Kyle and I's relationship, a lot of times I'm learning, like, so when Kyle says no, I'm going to lean on Kyle and maybe get a different answer. But there's sometimes where Kyle is saying, for the greater good, the answer is no. And the beauty is because I don't get to play the boss card, it's just no. It's like, deal with it. And it's like, okay. But it's really helped me kind of back off of that I'm more important than you mentality and just go, okay, what really is for the greater good? What's, for this service, and what's our end goal? Our end goal is to first worship our God, but two, to make sure that everybody in this room, even over ourselves, is engaged in worshiping God. So for me, I kind of feel like that's the target on Sunday. So that's part of it for me as a worship leader, is undoing, one, taking off all the nice spiritual casings and getting to the heart of sometimes what's in my heart, which is just I'm more important than you, and I should get what I want. So
I think another thing that we've really been strategic about in the past few years is just making sure that the verbiage we use and some of the positions that we've titled aren't implying more importance or less importance to certain positions. One thing we've done is change the names of even the ministry. Now we call both what the tech side of the ministry is and the music side, both of it's worship. And sometimes just the implication of saying, well, this is the worship team and you're the tech team, even though we're not intentionally meaning that from a leadership position, people, especially volunteers and others, they read into that and saying, oh, well, worship's way more important. And so some of the words and the titles we use, we just want to be careful that we're not implying that one side's more important, especially if we're not meaning that. So we changed the same thing with our singers. We've probably don't even have the best name right now, but we switched it from praise team to just singers on mic, because we'd rather be generic than to really imply something that's not true and saying that, well, what they do is praise and the rest of you aren't doing that at all. So
from the technical side, about a lot of times I think can get the idea that just because we might be here earlier or have spent more time setting up than we observe the music guys spending in that, but just because we might have physically spent more time putting the stage together or whatever, the thought that they haven't been spending probably hopefully as much time learning and preparing for either writing the song or learning how it goes, that can be really dangerous if we're playing the I've been here longer card. I'm more tired, so I don't have to argue with you. It's just going to happen, and that's a dangerous place to be, especially weeks like this when you are really tired. But they put in just as much work as we do as far as prepping the service, and honestly, sometimes, and it's probably a bad thing on us, they probably spend more time with God preparing, because we can kind of sometimes use I have a lot to set up, so I don't have time to start this day in prayer or whatever. And one thing that we do is a technical side of this ministry is every Sunday morning we'll take 15, 20 minutes, meet as a team, lift up the day in small groups, pray about it, because we can get really caught up in the mechanics of what we're doing and lose sight of why we're doing it. And so if we can remember that just because it might look, and that's all it is, it might look like we've spent more time maybe getting ready, that it's not true, and that's a dangerous mindset to have, because we can't exist without, we would have no jobs without the music guys, and they wouldn't be heard without us. So we're a team, and to have any idea that any one side is more or less important, or more irreplaceable is silly.
Just to kind of go along with what everybody else was saying, I think we constantly need to just remind ourselves that we are all on the same team. We're all part of one body of the body of Christ, and we all have we've all been blessed with different talents and skills, and God uses those individually to come together to bring people up and just praise his name through everything that we do. So it's important for us to, as Kyle said, start your day, whatever in your preparation, looking to God and going before him, before we get the cables laid out and all the different things set up, we're glorifying his name through that before we even get there. So I think that's important just to remember, as we all are on one team, we're working together for the same goal and for the same glorification of God.
That's cool. I think that does speak to what Jeremiah was saying too about, just understanding your role as facilitating worship, no matter what spot you're in. And I think even in that, the prayer time we have on Sunday morning, it's become routine, but it's something that helps us to shape our mindset, help us to get our hearts right before we start. So it isn't just a whole bunch of, the band's up on stage praying, and we're back there going, those jerks, I can't believe they did whatever, and it's just that can happen real easily, because for whatever reason, a soundboard is this amazing wall that everybody thinks becomes an invisibility cloak. All of a sudden, behind it, you can have a whole different mindset than you do when you're sitting in a seat. It's funny how that works. Kyle says, I know they can see me. All right. Second paradigm, and this is something I want to talk about, Benji's point. For us, I think we have found ourselves, although I think there's positivity to what you said, peer teams or peer groups. There can also be hey, we're on different teams. I don't have to listen to you, you know, and I think that can also work against you. So wherever you find yourself in terms of staff structure or team structure or group structure, you know, I have found great value in there being a peer relationship amongst tech versus music leaders. But at the same time, you can't use that to pit one against another to say, hey, you know what, you're not my boss, so don't, you know, go take a hike. I think that, you know, can work positively and negatively. So we're even working through that still. You know, there's a balance there on either side, which we're going to talk about in a minute. You know, that idea of mutual trust becomes a big key piece. So, you guys have anything to add to that? Okay, we'll move. Amen. All right, let's move on. Third one, which I'm gonna lean to my left to let them explain themselves. But the mindset of you don't have logic. And again, like I said in the beginning, I do lean a little more towards right brain thinking. I tend to be able to believe things that I don't see the steps forward for them. Whereas I know, you know, those who are more engineering mindset say, show me the plan. You know, unless you can show me step 1 through 5, I just can't get on board with you saying this is a good idea because I'm going to see it failing unless I can see that plan forward. And I just think, again, you know, I wrote down, I said, tech teams should be developed to have an awareness of themselves in this, understanding sometimes logic isn't the only factor in a decision-making process. So, care to elaborate?
All right, so when Benji first got here, we had a different music department before he came, and they were really unusual for a musician, super planned. Like, everything was very detailed. We didn't really have to guess as to who was playing, what they were playing, anything like that. And Benji is not in any way, shape, or form detailed or anything like that. And as a person who likes to have my patch nice and everything laid out on stage, it was really, for a little bit, frustrating for me to be ready and have Benji roll in 5 minutes before rehearsal and say, hey, I'm going to play a dadgad guitar also, or we're going to have Alan play Mando, or I'm going to have this person randomly sing at this point. And then I got to go change everything I've done to accommodate it. And you know, part of it, I was a young guy, and you know, part of growing up and gaining experience is learning just how to act like an adult, you know. And so, you know, through working together and talking and having a bunch of conflict in the beginning, not so much anymore, came to the understanding that Benji is who he is. I can bug him every day with 20 emails. It's still not gonna. He's still gonna forget things. It's just who he is. He's not doing it intentionally. It's not malicious. He's not trying to leave me out of the process. It's just that's how his mind works. Just like my mind works in a very different way, and I can't change that. So what I've learned and what we've done here is assume that they're not going to tell us everything that we need to know. So we over-prepare. We make sure that we have extra lines ready for whatever they might bring, okay? Now, the other side of that is Benji has learned, like he said with my no's, you know, that's really irritating no. I'm going to hope that you just are okay with me saying no. And then there's I'll kill you, no, that's not happening. And he knows the difference. And he'll push on me when it's the I really don't want to, but I will no. And when it's the not going to happen, like last night, it's just not going to happen.
And we may do.
And we made it work. But the key with that is if I say no and demand the no just because, it's like crying wolf. If I say no and he knows that I'm just being a pain in the butt and not really, you know, there's really no good reason about it, I'm just, you know, lazy or don't want to change it, then that trust where he can trust that my no is actually no at times, it wouldn't exist. If I'm always saying no just because it's annoying or because out of principle he didn't tell me so, no, that wouldn't get me very far. It wouldn't get our relationship very far. So, you know, as far as, you know, having a really, you know, logical thought process, wanting to have everything planned out, it's just probably not reality. But you can go over and above to make sure that you know, within reason, whatever they want to accomplish, we can do. You know, and that's not, you know, if you have a smaller sound system or maybe not a lot of extra parts, there's still ways that you can structure your stuff to be able to grab, parts from somewhere else. You can always be ready. It's always better to be over prepared than under prepared. And yeah.
I would say too, and just kind of thinking through where some of you guys are. But one thing I will say about even with Kyle is like, the later I am and the more last minute there it is, the more permission in my mind he has to say no. So like if I come up last minute, it's very much a, hey, could we get this? I know it's last minute. And if he says no, I'm very okay with it. He's right. It's like we're trying to build some systems in where I really am better about just not last minute stuff but the reality is it's like I am in that administrative forethought is always going to be a left-handed function for a right-handed guy. It's just the reality. So and some of you who are doing both roles, and this is what I wanted to get at. For some of you who are both music guy and tech guy, it's your pastor that's showing up on Thursday or Friday or Sunday morning and changing everything. And so I want to give you some very wise ways and under his authority, but I think it's important in the right conversation. There is a lot of times when I sense some irritability from Kyle about something, it's not until he walks me through the process that I really begin to understand the weight of what I asked him to do. Because it's like, well, why can't you just put a mic up? It's not the mic, and it's now he's got to go repatch everything at the soundboard. Like there's a whole chain of stuff that's got to happen. And I think sometimes your pastor may be asking you to do things at last minute just out of sheer just an ignorance of what all goes into what you're saying. So maybe not in that setting, but in another setting where there's no emotion involved, walk your pastor through the process of what it goes to set up. And you don't have to remind him that ever again. What you've done is now he's gonna feel the weight of that, and it may kind of be a little more of a, hey man, look, I know this is last minute, and I know it's going to take you a while, but at least he'll be a little more aware of the weight of what he's asking. Because I know some of you are the tech guy and the worship pastor, and so man, you're already juggling like already more than what you should be able to juggle. But I think it's important that in all of that, there's got to be all of this, like honestly, this time might as well be called like counseling 101, because it's just biblical relationships. It's just, hey, instead of being passive aggressive and saying yes and then just being bitter and snapping at heels and stuff, you're just going to, in the right setting, respectfully, because you are under authority, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, you will never be given any more authority than what you're willing to submit to. So I've seen so many young guys who are they want to pastor mega churches, and they can't even take one command from somebody above them or one, like, I'm sorry, but if you don't do well with authority, you will not be given authority. So there is a biblical structure there. And so under your pastor's authority, you have to be under that. But there are ways to talk with him and help him understand what you do and how you do it to help him appreciate the weight of what he's asking.
I just want to mention one more thing too. All good stuff. Thanks, guys. One of the things that Benji was mentioning about, the later I ask for something, the less permission or the more permission Kyle has to say no. I just want to also add on the flip side of that, one tendency, especially for people who are not excited about personal interaction with people, which can sometimes be technical people, you can create this wall where you're happy about the ability for people to be scared to ask you for something, and that's not okay. There needs to be a mutual trust between those two teams. So while there's a great humility in Benji being able to say, hey, I know this is last minute, I'm sorry, it can't be in the spirit of fear. It can't be I know you're going to flip out on me, I know you're going to give me those death stare, but can I do this? You as the tech person also need to be willing to say, I know he's asking. He wouldn't ask. That's that mutual trust. He wouldn't ask unless he really thought it was important. And so at least be able to think it through your head and go, to the best of my ability, is this possible or not? And if it's not, then fine. The answer can be no. But don't just make it the, no, because I can't believe that you asked me to do that. It just seems unfair of you. And that kind of leads into the next piece, which is, I wrote down the paradigm of you're here to serve me, but I could also add the you owe me, which I think exists on both sides of that aisle, where, from a musical perspective, it can be hey man, I'm up here, I'm doing this, you owe this to me, you're here to support me, I can't believe that you wouldn't support me. And on the tech side, it can definitely be a, you owe this to me. You told me you'd have this by Wednesday, and it's Friday afternoon. So no, just out of out of principle, the answer is no. As opposed to the trust factor of, is it really possible or not? And let's have that conversation later is great advice too. Being able to say, let's work on it at the best of our ability in the moment, and then say, look, I busted my butt to get this done. I'm going to do my best to make it happen. But later on, let's have a conversation about what it actually took to accomplish it. That's that mutual trust piece that goes with that. So along the paradigm of, anything you want to add to that, guys? Cool. All right. So what can we do to build healthy relationships? What are some things that we can do to help to foster these things? I want to touch on a couple things. First, accept that you're different. Understand that there is just inherent differences between people who serve on the technical side of things and those who serve on the music side of things. And just don't set your expectations based on yourself. Don't say, well, if I was him, I would do this, because you're not him. So you're not going to do those things if you were in that role. If you were gifted the same way as the person, your counterpart, then you might not be serving in the role that you're in because you wouldn't be qualified for your role. So understand that part of the understanding of the body of Christ is that we're made up in different ways to be different parts serving a common purpose. So if you start to say, I can't believe they would do that, think about the fact that you're inherently different. And then this was, I kind of polled these guys to say, what are some other things? This was Kyle's point. Don't get mad on principle, and I'll let him explain on that. But, again, understand the environment you serve in. Understand that those differences result in being able to say, well, look, I think this way, and you think this way. So on principle, I'm not going to get angry with you just because you should have done this. I may get upset because you put me in a bad situation and you knew it was hard for me. But if it really isn't hard, you're just mad because he owed it to you, I think that becomes a dangerous scenario. So you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I said it a minute ago, but we need to make sure that when we're asked to do something, that whether it's a yes or a no, that we're honestly looking at the situation and not just, saying no because we're past the deadline, or this is the limit of singers I've told you that I can accommodate. So if you're asking for more, if I could do it, I'm not, because that's the limit, And sometimes there's reasons to protect certain things, to have a few reserves that they don't know about in case they come up and ask for something at the last minute. It's not a good thing to say I'm going to have, a spare mic and then use it every week, because then when it becomes normal, and then when they do ask, then you really can't. But if there is not a danger to the service itself or other things going around the building, it's dangerous to say no because of principle or precedent. A lot of times, and I struggle with this, I don't want to say yes to something because I don't want it to be the norm. I want to make sure, and I probably am obnoxious about it, this is only for this time. I make it very clear because I want to be able to protect the buffer that we've built in. But I don't want to say no for the only reason of, no, this is the limit, we can't go any farther. And that's where I guess the trust comes in, is there's times where it has to be that the answer is going to be no or whatever. But, being the answer being based on principle, or being upset by it, saying, Benji knows that I don't like it when he does this, and I'm just going to be mad at him. And the truth is, I don't always know why. Sometimes he just forgot. It's probably a lot of the time. But sometimes Pastor Jerry will ask him on Friday, or someone will get sick and they have to change, whatever. It doesn't matter the situation. He doesn't necessarily owe it to me to tell me the explanation of why he's making that change. And so for me to instantly assume that he just forgot or didn't want to tell me is a poor assumption on my part. And so, not that he doesn't owe me the explanation, but I should trust that the explanation is legit and not get mad just because, it's after what my imposed deadline is.
I think the one thing is that, we need to understand that neither side is necessarily being malicious in their thought. So if there was a request for something and we have to say no or whatever, both sides have reasoning for their question and answer. So it's just a matter of understanding each other's roles and talking about it beforehand or after the fact if it's a last minute thing. So I would just say that nobody, at least should be being malicious in their intentions. I don't, there's never been, somebody, I'm going to wait till the last minute just to see what happens and ask about this or whatever. Or, like Kyle was saying, we're not saying no just to say no. We have reasoning behind it. Make sure you have reasoning behind it.
Yeah, just to tag what Chris was saying, if you're going to assume something, just assume the best in the other person. Especially when it comes to different forms of communication, it's so hard sometimes when you're facing deadlines, you're like, oh, I got to get this question out there. So you might shoot a text to somebody, and sometimes there's just not a lot of communication in a text, and you're reading it the wrong way. And one of the things that I think we've all had instances of, I know Benji and I have had conversations before, it's like, hey, you sent me this text, and I just want to make sure I'm reading this the right way, because I read it like this, and we just hashed it out. But a couple things I guess I've just learned over the course of our relationships is, one, don't ever, just because you get a text doesn't mean you have to respond in a text. So don't let the medium determine the conversation. If it's a face-to-face conversation that needs to be had, I'd rather wait and have that conversation face-to-face than force it through a communication channel that's not really optimum for the message, especially on the more difficult conversations. Like, you just want to make sure that you're not causing friction in the communication because of the channel of communication that you're choosing.
Just something key that he said. I mean, I'm always one. I'll say it, 2 or 3 just quick thoughts. Technical people, you'd be shocked at how little thought comes from a creative person, period. When it comes to technical things or thinking, I mean, I'm being dead honest. I'm speaking for myself. Like, I just don't think things through. I'm like, my mind is always, and he's laughing because he knows it's true, but like, my mind really is always somewhere else. Like, I said in the songwriting thing, like, I am constantly writing in my head. I can't help it. I jokingly say, might as well use my powers for good, because I mean, it's not, I can't stop it, so I might as well aim it somewhere. So just understand that a lot of times there's no maliciousness, they're just not thinking. And so when Kyle says, this really is for this time only, I'm very okay with it, because I'm like, all right, could you make that a little more clear? Okay, got it. But another thing he said too is when you do have those little text wars or whatever, one of the things I've learned from our executive pastor here, which now he's sort of in more of a missions type, the guy is a master of just giving a little bit of time. Do not react. Even if it's a face-to-face conversation. I mean, I'm in the middle of something right now that's not here at the church, but like, just in going, God, I don't even know how to handle this conflict. And I just feel like right now I just need to wait until I do know how to handle it. It can wait. And until I'm in the right place. And so many of you guys, like, it's just, I mean, this is marriage. It's just like marriage. There's so many times where it's way better if I do not say anything in the moment. Because all you're doing is you're just digging deeper when you react and you say something stupid. And husbands and wives, we all know that. But when you work with each other, it's like, sometimes you just wait. Just let it sit. Don't respond. It really it can wait a couple days, especially with conflict stuff. So those are 2 random things.
It's cool. It's random things. I think when it comes down to even just understanding how this conflict works, you can really focus on what the other person's motivation is, and if you can shift that mindset to what your motivation is, and just self-examination to say, man, why did I get really angry about that? Why is it that asking for one extra thing, which, yeah, it was hard, but man, I'm here anyways. I got an hour. I could work on it, or not. But either way, why did that anger flare up in me? That's a humility thing. And on both sides of the aisle there, if we can get to a place where each of us are self-examining to understand, why did it make me feel? Why did I have such an emotional reaction? Or like Benji said, diffuse a situation by being able to react differently than they expect. Sometimes those texts come through because they want to fight. There are just confrontationalists. I have that in me. I'm a confrontationalist. I'm someone who'd rather just get it out in the open, let's air it, and let's get it done. And when I'm dealing with a non-confrontationalist, it's tough, because they don't want to, they're running to a corner, But I got to understand that, sometimes the confrontational people want to fire off an angry text because they want to get something going. And the best way to diffuse it sometimes is to give it some time and to be willing to say, I'm just going to respond by saying, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I don't know why this is upsetting you, but I really apologize. I didn't realize this would offend you. That's basic principles, but it's so powerful in the moment to not just escalate. And I know I've heard it from this side where, an apology comes in and it's like, I didn't expect him to react that way. And it has an effect for a long time. It's not like it's just that moment. It begins to build that bridge to relationship. And that's where we're going to land here, is the fact that mutual trust on both sides is so important. Being able to have open dialogue, communication is such a factor in that. If you're never talking, you can't have trust because you're never discussing it. If the only interaction your technical and music teams have is Sunday morning when the tech guys are in front of equipment and musicians are in high pressure situations on stage, you've created a disaster recipe. You need to find other times for people to get together, have conversation, whether it's hashing things out or just hanging out. It's important, So understanding that's a big deal. We're going to come back to that at the end. I'm sure you guys might have some things to talk about that. I just want to mention one other thing, which is respect the other's time. I think that's so important because it's a hotbed for conflict to happen on both sides. Musicians have a tendency to show up late. It's just the nature of it, right? And logical people can't handle it. They're just like, you told me it was going to be this time, And so having a conversation to understand why that's important is a big deal. But on the other hand, I've seen a lot of times where technical teams aren't prepared, and so bands are told, hey, be here at this time, and they stand around on stage for 20 minutes while that technical team sets up or makes adjustments or scrambles, and it's infuriating to the band because they're going, A, you told me to be here, you gave me grief because I was 5 minutes late, and then you're going to waste 15 minutes of my time while I stand here? Again, hot button for frustration and conflict. So you guys want to touch on that, but I think it's a big piece that can cause issues. And if you can respect each other's time and understand what the expectation is, it'll go a long way. So, thoughts on that? Yes?
Yeah, that's good.
I will say, I think that's always, for those of you who are more creatively wired, you're going to be a lot more guilty of that offense. When he was talking about a band getting there before the tech team, I was like, I don't know if I've ever heard of that ever happening. Just be aware. Like as soon as he said that, I was like, yeah, that's always something that. And again, it's because of the lack of forethought. By nature, like as we're being redeemed to Jesus' nature, we just need to go ahead and accept the fact we are selfish people. We just think about ourselves first, and very rarely think about anybody else or what they go through or what they're doing. So for me, and then you add, I don't think through other people's situations a lot, just because I don't think, period, about the things that I probably should be thinking about. So just if you're one of the creative, be aware that that's always going to be a struggle, and you need to go out of your way to be considerate of other people's time and try to really serve in that way. I mean, that's where service is doing the thing that you're not great at just for the sake of someone else. So.
Just going alongside of I think it's mostly the musicians that are late. One of the things that we do, I don't think do we have any chapel volunteers here? Great, then we can say this. All right, so don't tell anyone, it's a secret. We have our band get here at about 15 minutes earlier than our tech team, knowing that we're going to start when the tech team gets here. And we do that. They know it's just a call time. They know that we're not starting the downbeat then, but it helps the tech team and it helps all of us start at the same time. And so if you know that you're wired that way or your musicians are wired that way, there's definitely precedent to have a call time and then a downbeat time. So don't feel like that's being dishonest or anything. It happens everywhere.
And on the other side of it, when you're in a situation where you have a defined time to do your sound check and your rehearsal, as a musician, we would appreciate, as a technical people, if it's not our fault that you're late, but we got to end on time. So, respect that end time. If you guys showed up late, you have 10 minutes less. There's sometimes where the end time is kind of just, this is what we decided, but there's sometimes, in our place, we have a lot of people that come in early. It's loud. It's just not a good environment for people to talk and connect. So if, just have understanding on both sides of it. From a technical side, we need to be ready and prepared, and if they're going to be late, when they're ready, we need to get going right away. But on the other side, if you guys are going to be late, respect the time that's left and don't try to push it. It's not our fault that you didn't show up on time.
The one thing that I was just going to say, I deal with a lot of single appointment type stuff. So the one thing for me is if you're going to be late, communication. Just let me know. In being an engineered mindset, planning my day out and things like that is just as important as planning out the components of things. So if I know, I can better react and change my plans accordingly. So communication.
Cool, thanks. So bottom line, guys, is this. Mutual trust is driven by mutual vision and mutual goals. You got to understand that even though we have different components, different makeups to serve in the body, we're after the same goal. And so if you can rally your team around the fact that we are all serving, we're all worshiping through our own gifts and abilities, which is something that I drive home all the time to our technical volunteers, that understand that you're not here to join a cool club, you're not here to play with toys, you're here to serve God with the way He wired you and the way He gifted you, which isn't said all that often, I don't think, to the tech teams. And if you can rally around the understanding that you're all serving with a common purpose, and we can push everything up against, like Kyle was saying, the fact that we end we end our sound check rehearsal time on Sundays on time isn't because we're tired of running the sound check. It's because we want to serve the people that are here best. So if we run that time up to 5 after, well, they just got a mini preview of everything we're going to do in 10 minutes. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So again, just if you're not in a place where there's not a conversation being had about how are we serving together, what's the vision for us overall? We have a common mission statement here at our church, and those are important conversations to have. It's going to begin to build that trust to say, how can I help to support this focus, and how can I help to support this single focus, as opposed to I care about this and I care about this, and you guys are running in 2 different directions. And if there's nobody that can help to drive that, I would recommend there's usually senior leadership doesn't have a stake in the game. Ask them. Say, hey, can you speak into our teams as a whole and help us to rally around a common idea and theme? Pastor us, basically, is the question you're asking. Because it's important to be able to have vision and to have a passion in a single direction, as opposed to a tech team being passionate about being on time and a musician being passionate about the monitor wedge sounding good. Those aren't passions; those are preferences and things that irk you. You need to be passionate about the mission that you're on, the ministry that you're a part of. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that resonates. So we purposefully scheduled some time for questions. Please don't be shy. We'd love it if you guys would walk up to the mic here and throw some things at us. I'm hoping that some of the outgoing musicians will go first, because tech guys will need a little more prodding to get up there. But just go ahead and shout some stuff out.
Hey. Okay, so I have this ongoing thing with our sound people where they will, week to week, different sound people each time as well. I'll have a terrible monitor mix, and when I ask for anything to go up, it'll feedback. And now that's a technical thing. I don't really want to get into that so much, but I get frustrated when I'm trying. I can't hear myself. I can't hear my guitar. And I'm tensions start to rise. This is at rehearsal, not on a Sunday morning. But how can I within that frustration in the moment deal with that? Because I often find myself, I'm the type of person, my personality is I don't like to raise a lot of feathers. I don't like to be that way. So I never want to act like a diva, but at the same time I'm stewing inside.
I think from our side, a lot of times musicians have no idea how to communicate with us what they want. More me, or I don't have any of me in my monitor, those are irritating phrases, because probably there is you in the monitor. You may not hear it, and it's always hey, Kyle, can I get more me? And then start singing. And don't look at me for another 10 minutes. How do I know how much is enough? How do I know what you want? So really clear, detailed communication will be a help, because we really don't know what you want. We can guess. It might be wrong, but I know I could build Benji's mix without him on the stage, and he could walk out and it'd be fine. I just know what his mix should sound like. But that didn't come from me guessing. That came from him telling me, what he wants. His mix for our college group is bizarre. It has almost no vocal. I listen to it and I'm like, I don't know how you can like this, but it's what he wants. So it's, so from our standpoint, we need to make sure we're not trying to put our preferences into what your mix should be, but from the musician side, clearly tell us what you want. Very, very detailed. More communication is better. And if it still is a problem where you're having feedback or they just can't get it, maybe if it's a matter of your guitar's feeding back, your vocals feeding back, and it has nothing to do with the rest of the band, maybe schedule a time to have them come in and work with you on it. Have them come up and listen to what you're listening to. Because, there would be, in some systems, you could have your guy have a same monitor that you have back where they're mixing, so they could hear exactly what you're hearing. It's not feasible in every situation. But to have them be able to come up and listen with you, hey, this is why I can't hear this. I don't have enough guitar. From a technical side, there might be EQ adjustments or things that we can, and that's a technical discussion for later, to force into the mix. Even if it doesn't sound great, it'll still get you what you need. But I guess, if your guys are being lazy, then you can get mad at them. But if they're really struggling with understanding what you want, be very, very clear. That'll help.
Yeah, I would say, and obviously we're operating on a lot of not knowledge of your setup. Is it just you leading? You have a full band, or? Full band. Okay, and does anybody else have that problem?
Week to week, one week the volume will be great, and I can hear everything clearly. The next, it'll be quiet and feeding back.
Same guy, run sound?
Sometimes the same, sometimes different.
And here's where I'm coming from. I'm always the first to go. Like, typically, I'm like, okay, what am I doing? What am I causing here? Like, here's a great example. We have a volunteer this past week that was running sound, and so his tendency, and he's a great engineer. But his tendency is conservative, and so I specifically asked him. I said I need, on these 3 songs, I really need, like I jokingly say, I need you to mix like this guy's, how old is he? He's
50 something.
Yeah, he's in his 50s, and I was like, and he's a very conservative, like, here's another thing too, this is a sidebar, but this is hugely important with your volunteers. Know what they do outside of this church. Do not get frustrated with what they do, being unaware of who they are. I say that because sometimes we have some phenomenal people in our volunteer circles, and if the only thing you know about them is what they do on Sundays, you're gonna treat them poorly, especially if you're younger than they are, because this guy he's a brilliant businessman and very, very good dad, very godly man. He's the kind of guy you build a church on as a layperson and a volunteer. So I think that's worth saying. You've got to know your people, know where they're coming from, know their story. Because it is so easy for us to get results. And I'm not even speaking to your situation. I'm just saying, like, that's something I've really had to learn, because I am a producer by nature, like mentally. So musically, I get really frustrated when someone's either flat or something's going on. And I've got to be aware of their story. I mean, we've got some guys in our choir that they're good singers, but they're not the best singers. And sometimes they're really loud and, yada, yada, yada. Some of these same guys are like guys who are recovering addicts that God has written this incredible story of grace in their life, and they're a different person than who they were 2 years ago. That is who I want in my choir. And I better know their story and not just be always looking at results. But getting back to what I was saying is, with him, I was like, okay, I need you to mix these 3 songs like your arms are all tatted up. Just jokingly, because I knew he'd be like, yeah, whatever. Because I wanted just a more aggressive mix. I wanted the guitars forward based on these songs. And what I loved is that he did it. And he didn't get it quite right. He kind of overcompensated, but that was a huge step towards the right direction. And so in all that, I always ask, what am I, and then it was too much, and so we had to make a correction. But my first thought was, okay, am I consistently asking for I know I don't. I know there's weeks where in my monitor mix, Kyle's like, dude, I memorized, your mix was it was in memory from last week. And I'm like, it just sounds different. Something doesn't sound right. And sometimes it's, well, plug your ears in. So it's like, And so you got to figure out, sometimes it is like, I mean, I know there's times where like Kyle is making minor tweaks, but he may look like it's more tweaks than what he's making because sometimes it's mental adjustments. So you got to be aware for you is it's like, okay, now feedback, obviously you're not making that up. That, so that could be a lot of things. It could be that maybe you are asking for too much in relation to what's going on. It could be a training thing. The guy may just need more training and more, one of the things I always heard a guy say, that this was on marriage counseling, but he said, all right, if you're complaining about your wife being a nag, was she a nag when you married her? No. Well, what'd you do to her? You as a leader, if you bring somebody on your team, my first thought is, what did I do to them? Did I mess them up? Because usually it is. It's you doing something. So it's just kind of that both end. I don't have a good answer for you, but I'm just maybe throwing out some different questions to ask too. Are you asking for something that's inconsistent? Always check and go, is it just the mood I'm in? I really do hear things differently on my mood. So
one other thing I'll add is with monitor mixes, and Benji's helped our musicians learn this a lot. Monitor mixes aren't supposed to be a studio recording. They're not supposed to sound amazing. They are supposed to do three things: keep you on tempo, keep you on pitch. That might be it. Is there a third? Keep you angry. So a lot of times people will want, vocalists especially, or they're just going to want to be killed with their own voice, and that makes them pitchy because they have no pitch reference. Or they only want to hear the guitar, and they can't hear the drums because their guitar is so blaringly loud in their monitor that they lose their tempo. So part of what might help is making sure that what you guys want in your mix is stuff they actually need, because the more complicated a mix gets, the harder it is to pull certain things like guitars, vocals out for you to hear them properly. So if it's, I need more me, I need more me, I need more me, it might be, what can I get rid of that I don't need that will still allow me to hear the tempo and hear the pitch? Great places to look for pitch reference: bass and keys, not guitars, not other people singing. And, obviously we're all going to, the technical guys are going to want to have a quiet mix, because it just makes our life easier. Obviously we understand, or need to understand, hopefully we'll understand, that you guys need to hear what you need to hear to play and sing properly. But just examine with you and your whole team, everyone, what actually you need in your monitor. It'll help a lot if you understand what the necessary things are and leave out the other stuff. It'll make it easier. The other thing could be, if you're having consistency issues, is if you have a drummer. We have a few. One plays real quiet, one plays real loud. So Benji's mix will change significantly based on who's drumming. So if you have bass players or guitar players who play different volumes, different levels of aggression, or very different tone, that'll make your mix different. It'll be, if you have your guitar real nice and punchy one week and you can hear it well, and then the next week, you have a rhythm player who just has this massive ice pick tone that is coming through your wedge. Well, you're not going to hear your guitar. So try to have, as much as you can, even if you have different players, try to help them understand overall what you want the day to sound like, and try to, you don't want to tell your guitar players you have to sound like this, but having consistency in what they play and how they play is going to help not only for monitors, but also the overall mix and consistency week to week. We don't, and we try not to have drastically different sounding things every week based on either who's mixing or who's playing. We want it to be as consistent as we can make it. So that might help.
One more quick thing to add to that too, which I think we've learned recently, is, again, part of the way to avoid conflict is have expectations up front before you walk into a scenario where no one understands the expectation. But what we've done is be able to identify, hey, this is time set aside for the tech team to get their portion right, and then this time is set aside for the band to get their stuff right. Otherwise, you constantly live in this world of like, well, hey, we need a good sound check. Well, hey, we need to rehearse, So our Wednesday and our Sunday is structured so that there's time for the sound check, which is not the band's time. It's the sound guy's time. It's time to say, we're going to do a line check, and we're going to do monitor mixes, and whatever you guys need for that, you work through that process. Then the sound guy has had his time. So now it's time for the band to do whatever they need to do to make it work. So just however that works in your scenario, make sure you've identified that clearly. And part of it, it's a good recommendation from Kyle to set some time aside to work through those things as a team, as opposed to just not give it time. So, any other questions? Yeah, go. Oh, come on up. You guys just line up.
Our leader, worship leader, Ward Tech, he doesn't really have any time requirements. Our drummers show up constantly 15 minutes late. We have people who will come to sound check or not come to sound check and then not perform on a weekend, Sunday or Saturday. It's frustrating because a drum completely changes the sound, the volume, what everybody needs. And as a tech person, I just want to shut them all off. I wrote him an email, and I waited 3 days to send it because I knew if I wrote it that day and then fired it out, it was not going to be taken very well. So, and then I changed wording based on waiting 3 days. And his response was, well, they're flakes and that's how musicians are. And logically, that doesn't work for me because I'm like, we all made a commitment. We're all here to be here. How do you change that? How do you work with that? Things like that.
Okay, just send the nasty emails. That's what you do. Yeah, I think drummers just show up late.
Yep.
No, we've walked through a lot of the same situations, and just like what John had said earlier, part of it is I guess there's a couple issues that you're kind of touching on. Part of it is making sure that the expectations are up front with everybody. And at some point, there does have to be that conversation, and it might be a tough conversation depending on the person, but just, hey, if you can't be here this rehearsal time, there's so much value in what we do on a rehearsal that I just can't have you play on Sunday, and we'll just have to find somebody else. Or, on the other side of it, hey, if you can't get here on time, we've done both. We've moved back our rehearsal time 15 minutes and just said, hey, if you guys can't get here at 6:45, does 7 o'clock work better? So if everyone can get here at 7, let's just all get here at 7. So have that conversation up front. What you don't want to do is have that conversation on game day, because it just isn't going to go well. You're frustrated, you have time constraints. You need to have a conversation when you don't have those time constraints and when you can all somewhat think logically on the conversation. And then the other side is kind of what Benji touched on earlier, but just respecting the authority that you're under, and whether sometimes it gets nebulous, especially if there are two separate teams where it's the music person doesn't report to the same person that the technical side people report to, or if you're both volunteers, that may be the instance where you just need to get in somebody else from the outside to have those conversations with you if it's getting to that level of frustration. But if you are serving or under the leadership of somebody else who's making that part difficult for you, you just need to make that decision. You either need to submit to that leadership or get out from under that leadership. And sometimes that decision isn't easy, but ultimately it's not glorifying to God if you're not willing to submit to the leadership you're under and still staying under the leadership. That's not beneficial for anybody involved. And I know some of those things don't answer the specific questions, but you always want to get to what's the hard issue behind it, and what best is, what's really causing those, because those are symptoms. They're not really the problems. So what's causing those problems? I don't know if anyone else.
On the technical side, we can do a lot to make, we work a lot with volunteers, and the last thing we want to do is waste their time. So, if your drummer's thinking, well, but I get there and they're not ready, and or your vocalist, I never get my monitor mix right anyway, so what's the point? And I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but we need to make sure that if we're having a rehearsal time, specifically asking everyone to come, that it's a valuable time, that it's useful for the musicians and for us. So, when you have set aside rehearsal time, like we were talking about earlier with timeliness, just make sure you're prepared. Make sure that the time is useful. Maybe that means a discussion with your worship leader to say, hey, last time we did this, I didn't get the time I needed to make sure people's monitor mix was right. You took the entire time to learn a new song. And that might mean, you guys got to get music out to your musicians earlier or whatever. There's a lot of things. But the easiest way to have a volunteer not want to come is to waste their time.
And another side of that, too, I'll be brief because I'm not known for that. But to appeal to those guys, because we just can't, we have to have the expectation of that they work at the church, but at the same time, they don't. But the appeal for me of kind of what I'm coming to is like nobody wants to be the guy who shows up and everybody waited for him for 15 minutes. So like even one of the things I try to do is I start rehearsal at 7. Even if I'm just running a CD to get people, if it's a new song, we start at 7 no matter what. Are there exceptions? Yes, but I really try to stay by principle too. At least I'm playing a new song. Like we need to learn a song, we're going to use time listening anyway. And what you do start eventually creating is, well, everybody's in their place, and that guy comes strolling in, everybody's kind of like. So instead of it being, instead of me being the man and being the boss and saying, you weren't here, that's just not going to get anywhere. But if all of a sudden it's like, bro, everybody else here busted their tail to get here to rehearsal, and you're 15 minutes late, and it's inconsiderate. And the facetious side of me wants for me, I don't recommend this, but it's almost fair for you to say, well, okay, well, I'm not flaky, and I leave on time, so at 8, I'm done, bye. But that's the way to help them understand that. The whole, yes, do I understand the flaky thing? Yes, but that is not an excuse. I've got to suck it up and grow up and be a big boy and show up on time. So
I'll just say, too, going back to that whole expectation thing, it sounds like contract negotiation, but honestly, one of the processes that we've walked through on both sides of the teams is, up front telling our volunteers what we expect. But if you're in a place where that's not healthy, I think it'd be good for each team to talk about what are my expectations and then sit and talk about it and come up with an agreed upon set of expectations where we say, hey, look, as one group, we're saying we're going to start at this time. And then we can begin to put those expectations on new people that come to the team so there isn't a constant tension. Like, settle it. Whatever the negotiation is, like Jeremiah said, if 6:45 is not going to work, let's all agree it's going to be 7. Let's agree it's 8. Because if whatever time it is, as long as we all know and we all agree to it, then we can hold each other accountable. So you had one last question that we got to wrap up. So let's.
Actually, not a question, but a quick statement, because I think it might help other churches. The thing our church does right, using myself as an example, I solder wires together and I run a board. So which team am I on? I'm on our worship team. We only have one team, it's a worship team. We all get together for practice, and the practice doesn't start with instruments or with setup, it starts with prayer and worship.
Good.
We do a half an hour of that, and then they play their instruments, I go to my instrument, which is the board. And after you've prayed for some singers' kids' health problems, it's awful hard to have too much of a hassle with them.
Yeah.
And the other thing, going from the tech side, as techies, we tend to think what we do is pretty clear. It's clear-cut, we understand it, we know it, so we assume everybody knows it, because it's not that complicated. I was shocked to find out that's not true. I had to take the worship side of our group, sit them out in the sanctuary, play them some CDs, and then say, okay, now with that CD still playing, go up and stand in your position. Notice it sounds horrible. That's because of where you stand. You're not in the right place to listen. You're in the right place to lead worship. It sounds different. And now they no longer expect to hear a great mix. They know they're not in a position to judge it. They have to let me build the mix. So
good.
Show those guys things. They don't know.
That's good. Thank you. Well, guys, thank you for being a part of the class. We got to wrap up. I just want to say, we at the chapel, we love to help resource our churches. So if you have any questions we didn't get to or something else you're struggling with, a couple of our email addresses are on the website, thechapel.com, under the staff section. Shoot us an email, ask some questions. We'd love to be a part of that conversation. And we hope that whatever area you're serving in ministry, that you do it well and do it faithfully. So thanks.